All right, good afternoon, everybody. So there will be an assignment 4. It'll come out later today. It's pretty small, the scope of the assignment. But I'm going to walk you through, I guess, not the assignment itself, but understanding the code and the stuff you need to do in Unity in order to complete the assignment. So you need to have a relatively recent version of Unity installed. Ideally, you would have the 6000 version, so the most recent version installed. That lets you use what's called multiplayer mode, and so that lets you have more than one view of your game on the screen at the same time. So here I've got 2 players in the game. One of them is going to be in your main Unity editor. The other one will be over here. If you have multiplayer mode installed, where'd it go? I need my little, over here. You can set up to 4 players in total. So if you click those 2, you can turn on extra players. Here we're just going to assume there's 2 players. To use multiplayer mode, you need the most recent version, well, the most recent major version of Unity installed. So you need the 6000 version. Now Unity eats up a lot of disk space and it takes a long time to install. So if you have an older version of Unity installed, you don't have multiplayer mode available to you, I forget what it's called. I'll put a link in the assignment. There is an open source solution for all of this where you can simulate multiplayer mode. You have to install some software from GitHub. You just drag and drop it into Unity and Unity installs everything for you. And it gives you similar functionality to what this is doing. But you need to be able to test more than one computer. You need to be able to have multiple simulated hosts on your computer at the same time. All right, so let me just show you what the assignment does very quickly. Sorry, my laptop is underpowered for this sort of thing, so it's going to take a bit. I don't know, do I? Sure. I have no idea. I don't know why it wants access to the network right now. Oh, probably because well, maybe it needs access. Okay, so here, when you fire up the game, you've got these buttons here. You want to open up one of them as host. So a host is both a server and a client. So you need a server of some kind. I'm going to get rid of the server button so there is no dedicated server. So I'm going to click host. Is it running? It's running. Host. There we go. Okay, there we go. So there is a pretty well-known Unity multiplayer tutorial online. I cribbed the assets from their tutorial. So I still made them myself, but basically I copied how they did it into this tutorial. So you're always controlling the pink character. The blue character is the other player that's going to eventually connect to the network. So notice that here, whenever you move, the motion is immediate. Right? There's no network latency going on here. So all the inputs that you apply in the game, that the client applies in the game, get applied immediately to their character. All right, so this one's currently the server and client at the same time. If you want it to stop moving, just click somewhere outside the window and it'll stop moving. So over here, I'm going to connect as a client. I'm going to connect as a client. There we go. There we go. All right. Oh, you can see so let's drag this window over. There we go. Okay, so remember, you're always the pink character. So now on the other screen, you can see the blue character is moving. So the blue character on your screen is always the other player. And you're going to be manipulating the transform of the other player. Right? So all of the manipulation of the player under your control has already been done for you. And so again, you can see that there's a little bit of net latency, right? So when I start to move, there's just a little bit of latency between when I start to move and when the blue character on the other screen starts to move, right? And that's because of network latency. And so I've currently got this set up to update, the network updates 30 times per second, right? So the way this is set up is that the network transform that encodes the pink, that encodes this character's position and orientation is actually owned by the client. So it's not server authoritative in this case, it's client authoritative. And so the client has to send their transform to the server, right? The server then updates all the other clients. So there is a little bit of network round trip time that goes on. And so that's why there's a little bit, just a tiny bit of latency between the pink and the blue. All right, so notice what happened when let me stop the game and fire it back up again. Okay, so notice over here in your scene, you've got the camera, you've got a light, you've got the network manager, the canvas is just the background for the game, and you've got, I guess, the built-in event system. So when you start up the game, if you're on a desktop or something, this runs or a much better laptop, this will go a lot faster. Okay, as soon as you connect, not server, sorry, host. Notice what happens over here. Stop moving. Okay, so over here, you end up with what's called the player clone, and you end up with the other player clone. Other player is the blue character. That's the one you're going to be controlling. The player is the pink one. Right? And so the pink thing has appeared, and now when I connect as a client over here, hopefully you saw that. Notice over here there is now another player. Right? So that's the second player that's joined the game. And these are both, let's stop the game. So when you look at the other player in the inspector, right, you can see it's got a transform. It's a game object, so it has a transform. Right? It's got a renderer. It has a network object attached to it, right, because this is being updated over the network. And you can see that here we've got the synchronized transform box checked. So this is using a network transform to communicate the position of the game object. It's got some other options here. You can play around with them if you want. Also attached to this game object is the player controller script itself. So this is the script that you'll be manipulating. It's the script that controls the motion of the player. Right? There is the network transform. Notice that it has a script attached to it too. So I've had to specialize. I've had to extend the basic network transform to do some extra stuff. So we only send the position, the X and Y coordinates, because it's 2D. We only send the rotation about the Z axis, again, because it's 2D. Right? We don't care about the scale. Scale never changes. Right? If you want to, you can fiddle around with the position thresholds if you like. Right? It's not really that big a deal. Okay. So remember, when you start the game, you get one player. When someone else joins the game, you get a second copy of this player. They both operate using the same script, right? So they both have the player controller script attached to them. So that means in your player controller script, you need some sort of logic to deal with whether or not this is the controller for the client, right? For the person who's playing the game, or is it the controller for the character that's being controlled by the other player? So you have to deal with that logic inside your script a little bit. There must be a better way to do it, but so there must be a way to attach a component at runtime. I haven't had time to figure out how to do that. So ideally, you would have a separate script for the server, and you would have a separate script for the client. I've got it all mashed into one script called the player controller. Okay, so let me show you the network transform. Right, so this is so I specialize network transform or extend it. Right, to create our own network transform class, right? And this is purely for academic reasons. This isn't something you would normally do. Right? One of the things you might do, though, you might actually do, is do this and override that method there, right? So if you override that method there to return false, this makes the transform client authoritative. So anything that the client does is immediately applied to their object. Right? The client owns the transform. They push the change up to the server. Server takes their word for it, right? Communicates that information back to other clients. Right? Normally, this thing returns false. True, sorry. So normally, the network transforms are owned by the server. Here, because we want the client to move immediately, it's owned by the client. Now, in this particular assignment, we would like to also know when is this thing being updated. Right? So whenever the transform changes and sends out that information over to the network, we would like to know something about the transform has changed. And so by default, not by default, The basic network transform class, its method that communicates state transforms is empty. So it's a virtual method, right? So I've overridden it, make it non-virtual. So there's the event that occurs, right? So on network transform state update. So whenever the network transform states changes, right, this method will be called. Right? The only reason I'm doing this is so that I can communicate this information back to the player controller. So now the player controller knows, hey, you've got a new network update to deal with, right? And so that's you'll be interacting with that. How does that work? So it calls a method in the controller called on network transform state updated, which is down here. Right there, which we're not using yet, but you will use when I get the assignment all finished up and prettified for you. Right? So that's where you're going to put code that deals with a new update to the transformation. Right? So other player's position has been updated. Right, and you're going to want to do something with that information to update the position of the other player. All right, so let's go back to the game once again very quickly. So the way the code is written right now is that, host, you're under control of the pink player. And you want to update the position of the blue player. Right. So the way it's written right now, that's all being updated for you already. Right. So as I move the pink player, you can see on the other screen the blue player is already moving. Right. And so this is built using the Unity's built-in network transform to change the position of the blue player. Right, and I can show you where I'm doing that right now. I'm going to remove it before I give you the assignment. Right, so in the update method for the player controller, right here, right. So if there is another player, right, I just immediately update the other player given the communication, given the given the information sent by the server. All right. So that shows up other player, view up here, right there. So that's the network object corresponding to the other player, right? It's the thing that has the network transform, right? So if you go into that object, you can get its transform, and that'll be the updated transform, right? So its transform has been updated via the server. Right? And so you can grab that information from it right now. Right? So that's going to move down to here eventually. Right? And you're going to do most of your work inside of here or adding other methods that do stuff here. Okay, so what else is going on here? So in update, if the mouse is inside the application, basically all I do is grab the mouse position and use that to control the position of the, or control the steering of the player. Right? The details aren't super important. If you want to read the code and see how it works, you can. You can also, I'll link to the tutorial I was following. You can also watch the tutorial to see how they're doing it there. All right, what else is going on inside this class? So that's the speed that the player is moving at. It's always 3. There's a camera here. It's useful to have the camera in the update method. We need the camera to figure out some information to transform the 2D mouse position into 3D world coordinates. And this is a networked application. So instead of a mono behavior, you extend network behavior up here. I'm going to grab a reference to the other player for you so you don't have to try to deal with it yourself. Right? So that's a reference to the other player that connects to the game. That thing there, the other avatar, so that's the blue object. That's the one that you need to control. So whenever you're manipulating, whenever you want to manipulate the position of the other object, it's the other avatar's transform that you're changing. Initialize doesn't do anything, it just grabs a reference to the camera. On network spawn is the method that's called. when the client or when there is a connection to the network. So when the host starts up, on network spawn is called. When the client connects to the host, on network spawn is called. Right. Let me get rid of this line here. All right. So remember, Unity will do all of this stuff for you, right? So everything I just showed you, Unity is perfectly happy doing everything for you. Oh wait, I got to get rid of the other thing too to make it a little. Where am I moving the other person's object? Here. So I'm going to comment this out too. So this is commenting out the code that moves the blue player. Hopefully this compiles. Okay. Oh, was it because I hit the button twice? It's because I hit the button twice, right? Okay. All right. So I've commented out the code that shows the blue player. I'm going to join as host. Oh, or at least I thought I commented out. Oh no, I didn't. It's still showing up. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to connect as a client over here. Okay, so notice there is a second pink player, right? So if you don't do anything, right, Unity will automatically draw the other player on your screen, and it will update the position of the other player on your screen for you, right? So it does everything for you, right? Because it has the network transform. It automatically spawns the other player, which is over. Sorry, let me stop here. Okay, so there's my player on this screen. That's the player from the client that just joined, right? That player's transform is constantly being updated by Unity, right? And so if you move around, right, notice that on the other screen, the player corresponding to the one I'm controlling here is moving around, just like the blue player used to move around on the other screen there, right? So instead of having Unity do all of this for us, right, the purpose of the assignment is to have you control or deal with the network updates manually yourself, right? And so the blue thing over here is going to be the pink thing that's moving on the other screen, right, which you're going to control. And then you're going to do things like put in dead reckoning and some error correction to see how it differs from what Unity does. Okay, so let me stop that. So that was fun trying to figure out how to get Unity not to show the other player automatically. Okay, I'm going to put that back in and take this out. Okay, so the reason I'm not just removing the other player is because I need its network transform in order to communicate to the actual its actual position, right? So I'm just turning off its renderer here, so the second pink player is actually in the scene. It's just that you can't see it, right? But you can access its data. And so that's how I've set up the assignment. There's probably a much better way to do this, but I don't know Unity that well, and we need to get this done, whether or not it's quick and dirty. All right. Okay, so remember, when you start up the game and a second player joins, there's two instances of the player controller. So inside the player controller, you sometimes need to know, is this particular player controller the client or is it the server, right? And so there are properties isHost, so that is true if this player controller is the host, right? And isClient if it's a controller on the client, right? Now remember, a host is both a server and a client. So if you don't have an else if here, this runs if it's a host as well. Right. What else is going on here? Is local player? if you have a network object, you can determine whether or not it corresponds to the local player or the one on the other client by accessing its local player property right there. Right? So if the other network object is not the local player, right? So it's the other pink player that Unity is inserting into my scene for me, right? I'm going to turn its renderer off. So that's how I deal with that there. Okay, if you're a host, we want to know when clients are connecting and disconnecting, right? And so the way that you can determine if a client connects is that when that method is called by the network manager, it will also inform that method inside the class, right there, that somebody has connected, right? So in here, when the client connects, I'm looking for the new player, the new network object that has just joined my scene, right? That's the clone of, that's the second clone of the player, right? And so for the host or for the server, the other player is the newly connected client's player, right there. Right. So I'm listening for connections there. On disconnect, you should deal with the fact that there's no longer another player. If I get around to it, I will. If you're not the host, so if you're just a client, right? So when the client connects, they need to figure out where is the host's, what network object corresponds to the host's network object. So the code gets repeated here, right? This time I'm looking for, it's the same code, but now you have to remember that the code is running on the client's machine. So you want to know who is the other non-local player, i.e. the host, right? And that non-local player becomes the client's other player, right? And so apparently this sort of thing is quite common in Unity, right? Inside your controller, there's often this logic that toggles between whether or not you're a host, a server, or a client. Again, there must be a cleaner way to write the code, but this seems to be the most expedient way to handle things. All right, so what's going to happen is, let's fiddle around with the network latency. Okay, so coming back to here. Hopefully your computers are faster than mine. Okay. Oh, never mind. There we go. Network Manager. So when you click on the Network Manager, this is where you can fiddle with all of your network-related settings. So there's your Network Manager object. You can see here it's got a bunch of properties that you can fiddle around with. Right there is the tick rate, right? So it's currently set to 30 frames per second, or 30 times per second, right? If you set that to say 1, then network updates occur once per second, right? So that's useful to look at. Now, if you're going to change this, you have to save your scene. If you don't save the scene, the other client doesn't get this guy doesn't get the change, and then Unity complains that that your player 2 is using different network settings than player 1. So you have to do the save there, and then you can run. We want to host. Okay, so again, notice that on the if you're the player on this, if you're in control of the player, the updates happen immediately. When I connect as a client, see on the other screen what's going on with the blue. So the blue character on the other screen corresponds to the pink character on this screen, right? Notice how big the lag is, right? So when I make the change in motion here, it takes a long time for the client to catch up, right? And that's because the network manager is only sending out updates once per second, right? And so it would be nice if we can make that motion look a little bit better. And so the only way to make this look better is if you can guess, right? So remember, you're going to be controlling the blue character, so you're going to want to guess where have you actually moved while you're waiting for the network updates to show up, right? And so in your update method, yoink. So remember, update runs at the frame rate, right? It's not running at the network update rate. So update rate runs at whatever frame rate or tick rate you've got set in your game, right? And so here you can do some extrapolation or dead reckoning to figure out, hey, you can do some calculation to figure out how fast do I think the other player was moving? What direction do I think the other player was moving in? Can I guess where they might be at this particular point in time while I wait for the network update to show up, right? And so you'll have to add some code, which I'll explain in here, to do some prediction instead. Right. So you can fiddle around with the tick rate. There's other things you can do as well. Where did they go? Somewhere in here you can play around with, there's a way to simulate network lag and stuff like that. There it is. So under Unity Transport, so remember this is the transport layer that Unity gives you, deals with all the low-level networking stuff. There's this debug simulator stuff you can set here. So you can set in a delay for how long it takes for packets to arrive, right? That simulates the network latency, right? Here you can set the packet jitter, right? So you can add a random amount of time between when packets arrive and get sent out, right? You can fiddle with the drop rate. So packets can disappear on a network. They can be lost and not delivered. You can fiddle with that. I don't recommend you fiddle with this for this particular assignment. I think that's going to really mess things up, right? So if information gets lost, I don't know if it's easy to recover from or not. But you can play around with those as well. All right. Is there anything else to say about this assignment? So it's going to be pretty straightforward as far as the amount of code you have to add. It all goes into one class, so you don't have to make your own classes and other things like that. Basically, we're just going to be doing some sort of prediction and some sort of error correction, right? So it's going to sort of look like the original assignment 4 that Dr. Graham gave to me. It's just going to be all updated for a newer version of Unity. All right. Any questions, I guess? Yes? Yes, I will get around to updating the slides and the lecture once I get the assignment out. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah? Yeah, it's going to be small, right? There's only a few days left in the term, so I'm not going to make you do like something in the scope of assignment 2 or 3. Yeah, so it's all going to be added here. And I still have to figure out exactly what it is you're going to add in here to see if it makes sense for our purposes right now. Yes?
When is the due date?
Oh, when do you want the due date to be?
End of December.
I'm very flexible. I'm very flexible. I'm not supposed to, the official due date can't be in the exam period.
Yeah.
The unofficial due date can. I mean, I honestly don't care. I'm not supposed to make you do work during the exam. Yeah. Unofficially, if you need to hand it in late, hand it in late. I don't care. Don't hand it in too late. I would like to not have to mark over Christmas. It's going to happen anyway. My exams don't end until the 20th. So, yes? Yeah. Yeah. Run that by me again. Yeah. That's the thing, right? So there's a little bit of there's kind of an issue here, right? So I can only ever move one of them at a time, which is a little bit, which is one of the limiting factors here. There's no good solution for it for this particular assignment. If you wanted to add that code in to grab the keyboard and have it move around, sure. I'm not sure how you send it to the other instance of. So it's going to be tricky. So you have to remember that. So here, let me run it once again. Do you have an idea how to solve that?
Does the instance have to be selected to take it?
Yeah. So well, I mean, somebody's going to get the keyboard input. So the problem is, I think what's going to happen is it's going to the player you want to give the input to is not going to get the input.
Then can we make it so that it's like by where we click?
Where you click. Yeah, so currently it just uses the mouse. Oh, I see. So you mean click and then run over to the other screen and click somewhere else very quickly? Yeah, so you're free to update the way I'm controlling it in that one method. So if you want to grab clicks and stuff like that, sure. So remember what's happening when you, I did the thing I wasn't supposed to do. I have to get rid of that button. I mean, ideally, this would be set up so that you could start a server, and then you could start 2 other clients. They would both connect to the server and stuff like that. Good luck seeing 3 of these three of these screens on your screen at the same time. Right? Even on my 42-inch screen at home, 2's enough. What am I doing here? Host. There we go. Okay. So remember how this works, right? So if I start up a client over here, right, you end up with another. You end up with 2 players, and they both have a player controller, right? So there's one player controller class. So if you're clicking in this screen, it's going to go to the player controller class on this screen as opposed to the one on the other screen. So it's going to be hard to simulate motion in both screens at the same time. Yeah. I mean, in principle, you could set this all up so that you had one on one computer and then one on the other computer, and you can connect to the host and stuff like that. None of that's set up. If you've got lots of free time on your hands and you want to do it, go for it. Right? And then tell me how you did it, because I'm going to have to know in 2 years when I come back to this course. All right, any other questions? All right, so look for the assignment tonight or tomorrow. Like I said, it's not going to be very long in scope. It'll be quite short. All right, and so I guess for the rest of the course, there really isn't any other material that I have prepared for the rest of the course. And so I guess on Thursday, I'll talk about the exam. The exam is also not difficult. Basically, the exam is here to make sure that you are paying attention a little bit. And so I'll tell you exactly what will be on the exam. I won't tell you the exact questions. I'll tell you what the exam will cover, what will be on the exam, the types of questions. And then I think we'll call it quits for the course. So no lecture on next Monday or Tuesday. All right. Any other questions about this particular assignment? Okay, great. I think I'm done for today. I'm going to go work on the assignment.